All right, welcome back to the Elias Macko Show. Let's talk a little bit about porch pirates. Now, we discussed this yesterday on the program. We were getting your stories about how you deal with porch pirates, and we actually spoke to someone that delivers packages for Amazons. It was quite the enlightening discussion. But one of the reasons we talked about is that more and more Montrealers are taking things into their own hands. They're putting air tags in decoy boxes to track the local thief in their neighborhood. They're even going to the length of shaming people on social media, taking images from their doorbell cameras, sometimes with success, right? They successfully shame someone into returning the package. But it got us to thinking about what consumer law in Quebec says about the responsibility over issues like this, right? Amazon delivers a package, they just leave it at your door, and then they go and they'll take a photo. They're like, hey, here's the proof we left it at your door. But what if it gets stolen? Who is responsible? Do they have to replace it? Let's talk more now with Jeff Orenstein, founder of Consumer Law Group, on the line. Jeff, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So I'll ask it to you this way. You order something from Amazon. It gets delivered. You get the notification it's been delivered. By the time you get home, it's stolen. You, as a lawyer who knows consumer law, what do you do?
Well, first thing, I looked up the law in Quebec on this issue, and I can tell you there was not a whole lot, okay? So what you have is, you got there's nothing under the Consumer Protection Act that I can find directly on point, which would normally be what you would look at. Mm-hmm. But just general law under the Civil Code, you'd have, and literally it's 2 seconds, it's Article 1717, which simply says, the obligation to deliver the property is fulfilled when the seller puts the buyer in possession of the property. There's no case law, by the way, on this. I haven't seen any small claims court cases anywhere in Canada as to what it means putting the buyer in possession. So the question, I guess, would be, when you put something on someone's doorstep and you send them either a text or an email with a picture of this, is that putting the buyer in possession of the property? That's really what the analysis, I think, would be. Mm-hmm. And I'll make this mention because, I use Amazon, obviously, as everyone else does, I'm sure. And there is an option where they tell you, where you actually can request, put it on the porch, put it in the backyard, there's a certain thing that you could actually request. If the client can specifically request for that, I think that would be satisfying the contract, okay? And I think, in fact, Amazon has done their job. Some people I know actually put instructions and say, call me at this number when you're downstairs. And so they actually come and do that. But I'd say for the majority of the time, most of when I get packages, nobody rings the doorbell. You simply get, an email within a pretty reasonable period. Mm-hmm. But you get an email that shows, that it's on the doorstep. As far as I'm concerned, we have to do a comparison as to what would normally be expected. And the first thing I think a judge would look at is, we all understand when bailiffs deliver something. And I get it. A legal proceeding could be sued for, millions of dollars, not a delivery of a pair of socks. But the concept is still the same, which is how do you make someone aware of something? And a bailiff would normally come to your door. They would ring the doorbell. They wouldn't just leave something. They would ring the doorbell. They would wait for someone to answer, and they'd give it either to that particular person or somebody who's reasonably in charge of the household. Mm-hmm. And that would be considered to be, putting someone aware of it. But if I do another comparison to Canada Post or FedEx, okay, they would come to your house. They would come, 2 or 3 times. They'd leave something on the door. And if you don't ever answer the door, they leave it, at a post office or at FedEx, and you can come and pick it up.
That's right.
I would say that Amazon is trying to save money on their process. Maybe some would argue pass those savings to consumers. I don't know. But they're trying to save on the process where if you have a delivery person, and I just heard from your intro that you interviewed them, but I've heard that they pay the delivery people per package that is delivered.
That's right.
So if the delivery person would have to come back 3 times to deliver it, I don't think they would take it for the same price, and in fact, they would have to charge more. And so Amazon is saving money by having delivery drivers come 1 time and dump it there. They don't ring the doorbell necessarily. They don't wait for somebody to answer. They don't come back 2 or 3 times. They're also saving money on, they don't have, offices all over the city like Canada Post does, where, if you don't get it, then you would be able to pick it up there. They don't offer that service either, as far as I'm aware. I know in the U.S., I think they do because they bought Whole Foods, and I think they have some in Toronto, but I don't think there's any in Montreal here. But so I don't know if they offer that service. But to me, they're saving money purposefully on these deliveries. But to me, that means they're taking on the risk.
Uh-huh.
And the risk is that if it's not delivered to the customer and they don't receive it, then I would say that in accordance with Article 1717, they're not in possession, the buyer is not in possession of the property. And to me, after my analysis, and it took me some time to do it, I would say that Amazon would be responsible.
We're with Jeff Orenstein, founder of the Consumer Law Group, talking about responsibility if your package from Amazon or other places gets stolen. And Jeff, what you just said, very interesting, and I think I'm on the same page as you, right? Because the reason Amazon does it that way is because it's the cheapest, most cost-effective method. And I think here's the give and take. I'll let you deliver your packages as cheaply as possible, but if it gets stolen, it is on you to replace the item. And as long as that, to me, that's a fair deal. I will take it, right? So I wonder if that, there's how the law is written, but there's also how things happen in real life. And I guess that's why you're struggling to find maybe a small claims court and that kind of thing. I guess that's probably how they deal with it. They make sure everyone is happy at the end of the day, but they'll keep that system because it's the most cost effective.
I think that's right. And I think the reason you don't see small claims court cases is because, I've had it happen to me, and you go online. I didn't even have to speak to a person. I mean, I went online, I clicked here, and they delivered a new product. So
yeah.
I think most of the time Amazon's pretty on top of that. I mean, maybe not because of a legal sense, but just to satisfy their customers. Perhaps that's it. Although I did read on the internet where, this has not been my experience, but there is out there where they actually forced some people to file RCMP reports or police reports, and they wouldn't give them their refund or a new product until they actually showed proof of a police report. I haven't had that experience, but I've heard of it. It's on the internet.
I would suspect in those cases it's because it's a customer that has repeatedly marked stuff as stolen, and that's to me like, let's say you live somewhere, after the third package stolen, you should no longer ask for the door delivery. It should be sent to the post office or left at a pickup spot, right? And so I think there's a bit of common sense there that I wonder what would happen in court if someone did take Amazon to court. I think that would be Amazon's argument. Hey, well, listen, you've had 4 packages stolen in the past. Why do you keep ordering it this way? And that's what goes through my mind.
I think you're right. I think probably there was a suspicion of fraud. You're right. The first couple of times, I think they probably would do it without a problem. After that, there may be a suspicion of fraud. But just to mention, you also might be in an area, unfortunately, where a lot of packages get stolen. I mean, that is a reality. But if that's the case, I mean, one of the recommendations people make is you can have it delivered to your place of business. That's a way that you could do it. You could have it delivered to, a relative's house if you're really having problems at your area of things getting stolen. Or as I mentioned, you can make specific instructions. You can actually write specific instructions on. There's like a box where you can write it, and you can actually put your phone number. I know friends of mine that have done that, and the delivery drivers have consistently called them when they're actually there. So there is actually a functionality that could help you.
So let's just leave our listeners with this. Maybe it's from another company. You order something that's got a significant amount of value, $200, let's say, and it gets stolen. And the company says, too bad, so sad, it's on you. What would your advice be to someone on the steps they need to take, and maybe take us down the path of small claims? What would be the steps you'd recommend?
I mean, the first step, obviously, is to contact the seller. And by the way, sorry, just to mention, I think there's a difference when I read online between when the seller is Amazon or if it's a third party. So there might be a slight difference because I think they make you contact the actual seller if it's not actually Amazon. So the first thing is to contact the seller, for sure. If you don't get any satisfaction there, the next thing I would do, before you go to small claims court, the next thing I would do is actually go to your credit card, because the credit card company actually could do something about it. I'm not saying they will or they won't. They have their own internal rules, but I would contact Visa, MasterCard. I would, ask for a chargeback saying, I paid for something, never got delivery of it. And a lot of times they will take your side and, in fact, make a chargeback, and then you don't have to do anything more because you got your money back. So that's another thing I would do. Of course, there's always the option, the Consumer Protection Office, the Better Business Bureau. These people can send letters, put pressure on them. You might actually get them to just do the right thing if they get that sort of pressure. After that, yes, you'd have to send a demand letter and sue in small claims court. And I think based on what I've read, while I don't see any cases against Amazon, although I didn't check I didn't check Wayfair and every single seller, but I think you would be successful because, as I mentioned, I don't think just putting it on your doorstep and sending you an email is putting the buyer in possession of the property. When you compare, what is generally the accepted method of putting it in the hands of the buyer.
Jeff, I always appreciate your insight. Thank you so much for your time.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Jeff Orenstein, founder of Consumer Law Group.